Nazi Germany launches attacks in the West in May 1940. The French army is regarded as the best in the world, and the Allied armies of France, Britain, Belgium, and the Netherlands have more soldiers, weapons, and tanks than the Germans. However, after 6 weeks, German troops shatter the Allies and stun the globe. How, therefore, did Germany win so quickly and decisively? Britain and France declared war on Germany in 1939 when it invaded Poland. However, as the German and Soviet troops annihilate the Poles, the Western Allies do little, and German Chancellor Adolf Hitler is already preparing his next move. He is rushing since the Allies aren't yet prepared for war, and his convenient partnership with the USSR may not last. In September 27, Hitler informs the High Command that he plans to launch an attack on France within a month. Wilhelm Ritter von Ley and almost every other German general are in disbelief. The French won't be surprised. They are fully aware that in the event of a German attack, Belgium must be used for this. Thus, the French will exercise caution. An attack on France cannot be carried out like the invasion on Poland. Instead, it will be difficult and extremely expensive. Our terrible sacrifice will be immense. Lieb 184. Hitler disregards the advice and directives of his generals to begin organizing an offensive in order to seize neutral Belgium and the Netherlands and take control of enough of northern France to launch an attack on Britain. November 25th is the new commencement date. Army Chief Franz Halder, the General Staff, swiftly drafts a cautious strategy that calls for the main German push through central Belgium. This is basically the traditional Schlieffen plan with a powerful right wing along the one cannot get away with doing such a surgery twice on the Atlantic coast. S. Görlitz 226. Throughout the months-long back and forth between Hitler and army strategists, the offensive is postponed 29 times. Hitler is increasingly leaning toward the concept of concentrating the comparatively small number of German motorized and armored divisions for an attack through the densely forested Ardennes region, so cutting off Allied forces should they, as anticipated, overrun Belgium. Army leaders believe it is too dangerous. Hitler was unaware that General Erich von Manstein also preferred the Ardennes route for what becomes known as the Sickle Cut or Zickelschnitt plan, but the Army Command suppresses it. The Germans were then forced to alter the design once more after a German Messerschmitt 108 Typhoon carrying it crashed in Belgium in January 1940. The final plan, which weakens Manstein's idea of a double pincer from north and south, is finally approved on February 24, 1940. Army Group B will simply pin the Allies in the north, while Army Group A in the south will lead the attack through the Ardennes, cross the Meuse River at Sedan, and race for the town of Abbeville, where the Somme River meets the sea, with priceless armor traveling along hazardous, winding forest paths and advancing with lengthy, weak flanks. Halder is warned by General Fedor von Bock, commander of Army Group B, that the strategy is risky. You will be creeping by 10 miles from the Maginot Line with the flank of your breakthrough and hope the French will watch inertly. You're as though air power didn't exist. The tank division's tonnage was jammed into the narrow highways of the mountainous Ardennes region. Where is the French army's mass located if you intend to lead an attack as far as the shore with an open southern flank that is 200 miles long? The War in the West, 1939 to 1940, Freezer Cambridge, page 297. The British and French are also planning in the meantime, but global politics make challenging circumstances. The Maginot Line is secure, and French and British strategists anticipate that the Germans would launch their invasion via neutral Belgium and the Netherlands. However, the Dutch and Belgians decline to establish specific plans for Franco-British soldiers to invade their country and work with their armies in an effort to avoid inciting the Germans. However, this remains the main objective of the Allies' Plan D. If the Germans strike, the British Expeditionary Force and the best French battalions will advance into the Low Countries and attempt to halt them along the Dyle River, the Albert Canal, and forts like Eben Emael. Additionally, Plan D is dangerous since the Allied forces will lack initiative, advance into the heart of an opposing onslaught, and the of their line, the Ardennes, is still only weakly fortified because they believe that massive armored forces cannot pass it. The High Command takes no action despite French intelligence findings pointing to the Ardennes. Additionally, there is no strategic reserve, which is politically beneficial but tactically dubious given that the 7th French Army is scheduled to march into the Netherlands. The Germans had 2.8 million men, 7,500 artillery, 4,000 aircraft, 2,700 tanks, and self-propelled guns on the Western Front on the eve of combat. Of the 157 German divisions, however, only 16 are motorized. 3.7 million men, 14,000 guns, 3,000 planes, and 3,700 tanks make up the Allies, which also include the still neutral Dutch and Belgians. Thus, the Allies prepare an uncertain offensive into the Low Countries, while the Germans hope for a bold Sichelschnitt. On the Germans begin Case Yellow, a campaign that would shock both the German people and the rest of the globe, on May 10, 1940. Germans flood into the Low Countries from across the border. Their goal is to make an impression. Their primary attack takes place in the Netherlands, where they even surprise bridges by using soldiers dressed in Dutch uniforms. However, the Dutch army is largely to blame for the failure of German paradrops at Dutch airports. However, the Dutch generally don't put up much of a fight. In an attempt to scare the Dutch into giving up, the Luftwaffe destroys the port city of Rotterdam on May 14th. The Dutch government escapes after the attacks leave parts of the city in ruins and murder 800 civilians, but they believe 30,000 have been killed in the mayhem. And on May 15th, the army gives up. Although some Belgian units do not receive the order to retire, Belgian troops also withdraw swiftly and successfully stall German tanks for several hours, a lesson that Allied commanders failed to learn in the misunderstanding. On highways congested with evacuating refugees, Franco-British troops make poor progress when they finally begin to move in the evening. Although the Belgians put up a fierce struggle against the German airborne and glider-borne forces, the invaders triumph on May 11th, despite the Belgians' assumption that Fort Eben Emael will impede the Germans. The Germans advance, but run into difficulties in the crucial Ardennes further south. Roadblocks and destroyed bridges keep the panzers from moving forward, creating severe traffic jams up to 250 kilometers behind the in front. The extent of the Ardennes offensive is only now becoming apparent to the French. Days ago, local commanders asked for reinforcements, but none arrived. Maurice Gamelin, the French commander-in-chief, now promptly dispatches 3 divisions to assist. Although Gamelin anticipates that it will take the horse-drawn German artillery 9 days to reach the Meuse, some Allied commanders worry that their enemies may be walking into a trap in Belgium and that it will be too late to move significant forces south. The Germans arrive at the river further south on May 12th as a massive tank fight rages near Honnot, where 630 German tanks destroy a French force of 470. Heinz Guderian's 99th Corps and General Erwin Rommel's 7th Armored Division get ready to cross. In a foreboding, suddenly, the Guderian-facing French units leave without a fight. The comparatively weak Panzer I, II, and 38 tanks make up a large portion of the German tank force, but they are delivered in large numbers with a surprise element. Hermann Black, Oberstleutnant, observes the attitude of the French are performing worse than poorly, said a few French inmates. Inmates respond, because England and the rich want war, when asked why they are at war with us. War is being fought beside us. We are not fighting it. When they talk about England, hatred shines in their eyes. This was the worst the French had ever been. Black Tagebuch. German recon cavalry and infantry crossed the Meuse at Dinant and Sedan on May 13th. The rapidity of the German advance is too much for the French to handle. As one captured French, "You are far too fast. Much too fast for us." The general candidly acknowledges it's crucial. Freezer 278. Some units of French troops broke and fled before the crossing because of rumors that the Germans were already behind them. Air power and the armored assault over the Ardennes are both responsible for the German victory. Even when both sides suffer significant aviation losses, the Luftwaffe regularly targets Allied columns. Before ground forces cross the Meuse, aircraft such as the Ju-87 Stuka dive bomber bombard French defenses. On the 14th, German tanks cross the Meuse, but they have suffered losses. Some are only 1/4 strong and are depleted of gasoline and ammunition. The still fragile bridgeheads are about to be attacked by French soldiers, and if they fail, half of the Allied forces, including their finest motorized battalions, will be cut off from the north. London and Paris are also feeling the effects of the frontline crisis. May 10th, Winston Churchill succeeds Neville Chamberlain as Prime Minister when Chamberlain steps down. A few days later, Charles de Gaulle is named Deputy Minister of Defense by French Premier Paul Reynaud, who also recalls General Maxime Weygand from Syria to assume command of the army. However, he also asks Philippe Pétain, a hero of the First World War, to serve as Deputy Premier, despite Pétain's belief that the war is lost and his accusation that Britain initiated it. Reynaud fervently asks that France receive an additional 10 British fighter helicopters. Although Churchill wishes to dispatch them, the British concerned about home defense, the cabinet only consents to 4. Given that Gamelin acknowledges he lacks a strategic reserve, several Londoners have lost faith in the French army. The Germans emerge on the 15th from their bridgeheads and make progress by evening up to 65 kilometers. Gamelin gives the order for the Allied troops in Belgium to withdraw after realizing the threat. Army High Command fears that General von Bock's plan to push his Army Group B's advantage in Belgium could jeopardize the sickle cut. In order to hold the Northern Allied Army in the expanding pocket and allow troops to catch up and defend the flanks against anticipated French counterattacks, both army groups pause for 3 days. This is a difficulty that Manstein's version of the plan had anticipated. Commanders who were lying don't take advantage, though. British General Henry Pownall loses his temper when a French general acknowledges that he is clueless about how to deal with the panzers. My God, how dreadful to be partnered to such a temperamental species. Jackson, 86. However, a battle near the town of Stone demonstrates the power of French armor and the reasons German commanders are hesitant. One of the most impressive single-tank operations of the war is when Captain Pierre Bilot's Char B-1 BIS destroys 2 Panzerwaffes, 11 Panzer IIIs, and 2 anti-tank guns. The 2nd Panzer Division reaches the sea at Abbeville on May 20th, despite the delay and Bilot's valiant actions. Many French troops are caught off guard or stunned by the constant barrage of airstrikes. Alexander Stahlberg, Lieutenant, admires the devastation. The streets were lined with the wreckage of a defeated French army. A never-ending chain of devastation included shot-up cars, burned out and punctured tanks, and abandoned guns. Beaver 114. Over 1 million French and British soldiers, the RAF has lost 1/4 of its strength, and they are besieged north of the Somme. The Germans are approaching quickly, and it's unclear who is in charge of the cut-off forces, while the Allies desperately plan a double counterattack to strike the German flanks. On May 21st and 22nd, Anglo-French forces, including Matilda tanks, successfully launch an attack close to Arras, but the Germans, who are struggling, repel them. In order to evacuate, Allied soldiers launch a combat withdrawal to the port of Dunkirk, a British ruling that many French people dislike. Von Rundstedt requests that Hitler halt the assault on Dunkirk because the Germans fear more southern counterattacks, and Hitler complies on May 24th. This choice is hotly contested. Hitler will attempt to hide this error later in the war by claiming that, in light of peace negotiations, he did not want to embarrass Britain. After the war, von Rundstedt will claim that Hitler gave the order, but this is untrue. In fact, von Rundstedt orders his subordinates to stop, but he tells them it came from Hitler, so they will follow his orders. Von Rundstedt stops the tanks before Dunkirk, but why? He wants his tanks ready for a Dunkirk-based Allied offensive. He wants his army to have time to advance to the Somme line in case the French launch a counterattack from the south. He wants his tanks to be ready for an Allied counterattack from Dunkirk. Von Kleist, the commander of the Panzers, believes that the territory surrounding Dunkirk is unsuitable for tanks. Von Rundstedt, Hitler, and the Navy High Command all believe that a quick evacuation of the BEF is not feasible, and he wants the Fourth Army to capture Arras before invading Dunkirk. Given that the Germans have already lost 600 tanks, and that Panzer IIIs and IVs could be employed against the French in the south, there is no reason to waste them on Dunkirk. The Germans anticipate that the Luftwaffe and artillery will be able to eliminate the Fourth Army and Allied forces in the pocket, can mop up after that. However, the BEF emerges for more reasons besides the German pause. A German staff van carrying documentation outlining the site of the upcoming German attacks is captured by British soldiers on May 25th. Lord Gort quickly dispatches troops, preventing the Germans from isolating the majority of British forces from Dunkirk, a potentially life-saving action. The evacuation of the BEF and French forces from Dunkirk, known as Operation Dynamo, starts on May 26th. The following day, the BBC calls for private boats to assist. German planes bombard the defenseless troops below, causing pandemonium on the beaches and inside the ships. Frank Hurrell, the quartermaster, is one of the injured. I boarded a boat shortly after 7 that evening when an air raid occurred during the loading process. I was blasted into the water when the ship was hit. About 30 of us were in the water. Due to my injured leg, I was only able to doggy paddle. However, I walked on water and returned to the shore to wait for another opportunity. Levine 187. To keep the Germans at bay, French and British forces engage in deadly rearguard operations around the town. About 700 British and 160 French warships of various kinds are able to evacuate 193,000 British and 145,000 French troops before the final men flee on June 4th. 88,000 soldiers, primarily French, who were guarding the evacuation path, are compelled to give up. German planes are able to 20 Allied warships are sunk, and numerous others are damaged. Given that the Belgian army abruptly surrendered on May 28th without informing the British or French, saving the BEF is an even more amazing accomplishment. In a contentious decision, King Leopold surrenders to the Germans. Even the Allies are furious, even though they have no plans to withdraw Belgian troops. Former British Prime Minister David Lloyd George refers to King Leopold's acts as a sample of perfidy and poltroonery, while Reynaud brands him a pig. In addition, the breakdown of the Allied front exacerbates tensions in Paris and London. Reynaud rejects efforts from Weygand and Pétain to seek a separate peace with Germany. Churchill refuses to accept British Foreign Minister Halifax's proposal for peace negotiations through neutral Italy. Hear of it. Even if we lose, we won't be in a worse situation than if we quit fighting right away. We must not allow France to drag us into the abyss. Beaver 133. The greatest French units and the BEF were either evacuated without their heavy weaponry, or now that they had been taken, the Germans focused on the remaining French soldiers. The front line extends along the Somme and Aisne rivers south of the Allied catastrophe at Dunkirk, and the Germans already possess a number of bridgeheads. The remaining ports that the 2nd BEF depends on for supplies are in danger because to the Abbeville bridgehead. Despite the hazards, Churchill has ordered 300,000 additional British troops to France in an effort to offer the French a sense of support. Colonel Alan Brooke is unimpressed. The French army is dead, and it's impossible to give a corpse any kind of feeling. Beaver 143. However, there is still some conflict in France. The French 7th Army launches an assault on the Abbeville bridgehead on May 27th. This comprises Manstein's Corps and Charles de Gaulle's division elements. While some German soldiers are alarmed by the B-1 bis tanks, the bridgehead is preserved, and the piecemeal Allied armored advances are halted by a number of 88mm German anti-aircraft batteries deployed in a ground roll. On June 5th, the Germans begin Case Red. They want to drive swiftly south after crossing the Aisne and the Somme in order to dismantle the French army before it has a chance to regroup. Initially, Army Group B's near Paris, 3 armies will move toward the Seine, Oise, and Aisne rivers. Army Groups A and B will then deliver the decisive blow in the direction of Troyes and Saint-Dizier, east of Paris. After that, Army Group C will break the Maginot Line at Saarbrücken to begin the third phase and carry on with the fourth phase in Colmar, where the Rhine is crossed. Additionally, the German divisions are now double those of the Allies. Weygand urges French soldiers to fight to the death to protect their positions, since the outcome of the upcoming conflict will determine France's destiny. In order to counter deep penetrations of German armor, he also presents a novel defensive strategy. French soldiers construct fortified town and forest strongholds known as hérissons, or hedgehogs, for all-around defense. These are to support German soldiers, and when German armor penetrates, Allied tanks are to confront it. As Luftwaffe General von Richthofen notes in his diary, the hedgehogs initially function. What appeared to be a success this morning was nothing at all. The French are tough and unforgiving. Every village has been fortified by them. When our infantry attempts to follow the tanks, the French hide and emerge when our tanks pass through. The tanks just drive on without the infantry because they are unable to screen for them. The infantry is unable to advance against the town's all-around defense. Everything bogs down like that. Biama, Tagebuch Richthofen. There is fierce combat south of the Somme on June 5th and 6th, with a large number of French forces. Fight to the death and follow Weygand's instructions. In certain locations, the Germans also slaughter French African colonial soldiers after they have surrendered. In total, at least 3,000 people are killed by SS and Wehrmacht forces during the battle. There were other massacres of civilians, including at Vingt and Oignies, as well as French African and about 200 British and French captives, according to Scheck, S. 11, 63, 169. An inferior race does not deserve to fight such a civilizing race as the German race, a German officer tells a French counterpart of his conduct during one of the killings of African troops. Fargetas, 457. However, on June 6th, the Germans make their breakthrough along the Chemin des Dames, cross the Aisne, and make two crossings of the Somme. Along the estuary of the Somme, Allied forces withdraw to the Braille River. Once more, the German tanks outflank the new Allied position by dark because they are too swift. General Hermann Hoth's panzers arrive at the intersection at Forges-les-Eaux on the 7th. This action divides the 10th Army of France in two. Hoth wants to advance into Rouen and the Seine River, but his commanders are concerned about his flanks because German troops is being held back by Allied opposition. However, Rommel gives the order for his 7th Division to rush to the Seine without waiting for approval. This is hardly the first instance of German commanders using forceful improvisation during the campaign. The Rouen bridges are promptly destroyed by the French, but Hoth's discovery compels a general retreat that lowers Allied spirits. Even French armored forces that could have posed a threat to them, such as at Haute-Epine, avoid confrontations, the Germans observe. The regiment encountered multiple lone enemy tanks, which immediately fled when fired upon. A few crews departed their cars without taking protective measures. The 1st Cavalry Division report on the Feldzug in the West B.A. May. The second stage of Case Red starts on June 9th. According to Army Group A reports, the French have organized defenses and effective artillery fire, which the Germans find difficult to overcome here as well. However, as one French staff officer observes, a stunned and haggard herd, complete mixture of units, regiments, and services, it's not so much a question of morale these days. Other sectors of the French army are disintegrating. People are confused and unaware of their current situation. They get scared when they see an airplane. Creme Brille, 294. The Germans soon take over everywhere. From the Aisne, Guderian's panzers sprint south. Manstein's infantry crosses the Seine into the French rear, and the following day, the 9th Army crosses the Marne River. The 200,000 men of the 2nd BEF are withdrawn by the British after they conclude that the military situation is hopeless. Reynaud encourages Weygand to continue fighting after he proclaims that the war is lost and that France must make peace. You are taking Hitler for Wilhelm I, the old gentleman who took Alsace-Lorraine from us, and that was that. Hitler, however, is Genghis Khan. Jackson, 103. On June 14th, the same day, the Germans arrive in Paris. Day the German offensive's third and fourth phases start. On the 16th, the Germans arrive at the Loire River and the Swiss border, while Verdun, a representation of French resistance during World War I, collapses. The army of France is in ruins. The news is all negative for the Allies politically. Norway gives up when Italy declares war on them on June 10th. The administration suffers a deadly blow when Pétain threatens to quit if Reynaud doesn't request an armistice by the 16th, when the majority of French cabinet ministers support one. When Reynaud approaches President Roosevelt for assistance, he is met with only sympathy. In order to continue the war, London suggests that France and Britain become a single state. However, Pétain believes this is a British scheme to seize French territories and refers to it as a marriage to a corpse. Additionally, he desires peace to prevent a possible communist rebellion. After Reynaud steps down, Pétain takes over as premier and requests an armistice the following day. Some Frenchmen do wish to resist. De Gaulle, for example, calls on his compatriots to carry on the battle in a radio transmission from England. That day, not many people heard him, but that will change. Mussolini determines he wants an Italian triumph prior to the end of the war as armistice talks get underway. 22 Italian divisions launch an attack in the Alps on June 21st, but only 6 French divisions allow them to make it very far. In order to protect Italian sentiment, there is fierce combat in the mountains on June 23rd and 24th as the Germans use air and ground forces to attack the French from behind. Ultimately, the armistice goes into effect on June 25, 1940. 2,900 Dutch, 7,500 Belgian, 12,500 British, 59,000 French, 45,000 German, and 1,250 Italian soldiers are killed during the 46-day Battle of France. 8 million people become refugees, and over 30,000 civilians from France, the Netherlands, and Belgium perish. More than 2 million French and troops from Belgium end up as POWs. The amount of material devastation is indicative of the magnitude of the German victory. The Allies lose 3,300 tanks, and the Germans lose 839. The Germans lose 1,800 planes, and the Allies 3,020. Debates erupted almost immediately over why the German victory came so quickly and so thoroughly. General Gamelin accuses the men of being cowards, de Gaulle claims that the army was misused, and Pétain claims that the nation lacked moral strength. Marc Bloch, an officer, historian, and subsequently resistance fighter, highlights the High Command's incapacity. Because they were unable to respond to the speed and strength of the concentrated German armor, the Allies ultimately lost the battle. They suffered from infighting and a partial loss of morale. They were unable to organize their tactics to take advantage of German mistakes, and they overestimated the impact of tactical air power. The neutral U.S. is among the Allied governments and citizens who are shocked by the German victory, which is a wonderful surprise at home and takes into account its worldwide security. Even though the infantry carried out the majority of the battle, German propaganda portrays the victory as a tank blitzkrieg, a perception that endures to this day. German officials now exaggerate their own skills and military prowess, and few will challenge Hitler going forward because his prestige is at its height. Because they got away with it, German leaders ignore their errors, such as exposing their flanks and not having enough ammo. The war has not ended, but France has lost. Both Britain and de Gaulle's Free French are committed to fighting. Germany has already started its next offensives, as German planes fill the English sky and Berlin planners focus on the east. The situation for Nazi Germany had drastically changed just 5 years after the Battle of France. Troops from the United States, Britain, and France were approaching the German border. Rhine River as Hitler waits in his bunker as the Red Army prepares to cross the Oder and attack Berlin, the Reich capital. These final weeks of the Second World War, which don't typically receive the emphasis in conventional documentaries, may be of interest to you. We created 2 series with a combined duration of more than 8 hours, therefore they deserve it. The final set-piece combat in the West, the Allied advance into the Lower Rhine region, and the eventual Rhine crossing are all covered in Rhineland 45. The Battle of Berlin, the spectacular conclusion of World War II in Europe, is recounted day by day in 16 Days in Berlin. Both series make use of intricate animations and maps.